JP Smith, or JP as he's known to pretty much everybody who has engaged with him, has been a councillor at the City of Cape Town for a quarter of a century. He is the man who takes responsibility for the crime issues there. It's a difficult job, but we're going to find out from him in just a moment what is being done about the N2, which has caused so much concern amongst the BizNews tribe. More than 150,000 people have watched the last video that we had of an interview with two people who are really hot under the collar about it. JP's the man to fix it. Does anybody call you John Pierre? I've just seen everywhere I see you, you're JP. Perhaps your mom?
Just my mother. Of course, with Jean. I think some of my family members, for everybody else, it's JP, and I try and keep it on a first-name basis. As a political leader of mine is like to say, those who matter don't mind, and those who mind don't matter.
What motivates you? And I ask this because I was having a look back. You've been a councillor at the City of Cape Town for 25 years. Mostly people in politics become councillors and then off they go into national politics and perhaps become eventually ministers, which is now an option that is open to people from your political party. But what's kept you in Cape Town?
Local government. I really have a passion for the municipal level of governance. I think this is where the rubber hits the road. I think if you derive your existential validation, your meaning every day out of what you're able to do and whether you're able to fix problems and help people, the place where that happens most meaningfully is local government. I'm not tempted to go to provincial or national government. There is certainly good that can be done, and increasingly I'm hoping that we'll at some point have the national policing portfolio for somebody other than the ANC to do the right thing with. I'm confident that myself or Ian Cameron or a number of other people could start getting SAPS back online. It's a much neglected entity and desperately in need of adequate resources and proper management.
JP, it's a point that kind of struck me when I was watching the Oval Office engagement, and Johan Rupert, of all people, threw you under a bus. Well, certainly you weren't there, but he certainly threw your party leader, John Steenhuisen, under a bus by saying, look at Cape Town. You can't even get your crime right there. If you were in the Oval Office, sitting opposite Trump, what would you have said to him?
It's the problem with all of these things. It requires a longer explanation than most people have attention span for. But in a soundbite, I'm happy to take responsibility for those things that are my job, that are my responsibility. We don't control the South African police or any part of the criminal justice system, nor does the provincial government. And really, those things are melting down, not just in the Western Cape, but across South Africa. I think everybody pretty much has noticed. And the debate has swung from people tolerating the idea of national government hijacking or absorbing or taking control of Metro Police to very much the opposite direction, with an increasingly loud debate and support for devolution, to see us take control of the National Police Service under provincial or local government. And I would have said to Johan that, we can't fix what national government is allowing to decay in the National Police Service and the rest of the criminal justice system, but at local level, we are certainly stepping up as much as we can with massive additional policing resources, 1,300 LEAP, another 750 Metro Police on Wednesday, 2,100 staff already since the beginning of this term alone in these 4 years. We are adding investigative powers. We're adding additional crime information powers. We're formally lobbying with a motion to council adopted in the last 2 weeks to move from intergovernmental relations and asking nicely to litigating on the subject of the devolution of power, to compel national government to give us the formal right to investigate and do crime intelligence, and to suggest that denying us the opportunity to do so is irrational, and investing in technology, in cameras, in dash cams, in body cams, in more CCTV, using drones, including for the topic we're about to discuss, and a whole range of other enablements that much of which should really be driven by SAPS as the lead agency but where that capacity is just no longer available. Aside from the very obvious fact that SAPS is now deployed at somewhere between half and a third of their resources at the average police station. And when you do that to a police force, you are guaranteeing the residents in that city and in your country very tough times. And we are trying to step up our resources as best possible. Wednesday, we will launch an extra 5 officers per ward. 3 years ago, we launched LEAP, 1,300 extra officers targeted at 13 priority stations. So we are, from our side, doing a lot more than local government should be doing on a mandate that's not ours, keeping in mind that local government mandate is traffic and bylaw enforcement, but about 2/3 of our resources is now spent on supporting SAPS and crime prevention. I did warn you that it was a longer answer than was easy to communicate.
And it's not at all. No, very good answer. It sounds a lot to me like when I spoke with your colleague, the mayor, Jordan, probably a few years ago. Just after the local elections, and he said that they're not going to wait anymore. You're not going to wait in Cape Town for national government to allow you to provide electricity. You're going to kick the door down. There was a little opening in the door, and that was the way you were addressing it. It seems as though you might be doing something similar now on crime as far as Cape Town's concerned.
We've been proceeding for the last few years with the limited investigations and information management or crime intelligence. Again, we've obtained legal opinions that say while local government is not expressly enabled, nor are we explicitly prohibited from conducting such activities, so we are doing it. This is what Becky Cele used to refer to as the rogue unit, but that rogue unit has helped extricate the tendrils of organized crime out of our procurement system to very significant amounts. It is helping us ensure that every one of our officers who is attacked, that there's justice for them, something that does not happen with the hundreds of police officers murdered every year in South Africa. And it is helping us get much better conviction rates for our firearms and be able to shine light on where there are failures in the criminal justice system relating to, for instance, the 215 firearms we've taken off the street since the beginning of the year, and the 2,639 firearms over the last, 3.5, almost 4 years now, and the paltry conviction rate of about 4.6% for that. I would not be able to tell you what that conviction rate were, but for the fact that we are doing watching briefs and tracking those cases as they go through court. So in many cases, we've stepped up. We've started doing this thing. We're increasingly insisting on assisting with problems like kidnapping for ransom and extortion, which cause us a lot of headaches and which traditionally in the past would have been SAPS's exclusive domain. Every day now, we give SAPS over 200 officers to assist on gang enforcement operations to bolster their numbers, which are just not adequate. In fact, I think on many days we are contributing more staff numbers to the gang operations than the National Police Force, and that's a feature of the kind of budget starvation they've been subjected to over quite some time, and a net attrition of staff numbers year on year in this province, in this city, and I'm sure the rest of South Africa as well.
But what happens in cities that don't have the City of Cape Town's approach towards this? Surely then crime will just get worse and worse?
I think this is what you're seeing. We had a honeymoon after the inception of democracy. Our murder rate reduced attractively, a very positive trend with the reduction of murder. But in the last few years, we have seen a distinct spike, a steady upward trend in those murder statistics. At this stage, I think that by international comparison, those stats cannot be acceptable to anyone. Cape Town has this unique additional problem of embedded gang violence as gang culture that has been around for many decades, and it is a major misery to us. Between 20 and 40% of our murders per year are gang-related. Take those murders out of the city, and our murder rate drops out of contention altogether in terms of the rest of South Africa. But, if you diligently apply yourself, as we have with the additional resources in the priority stations, keep in mind that around 11 stations generate more than half of your violent crime statistics out of the 63 police stations in the city. So what we've done is targeted those police stations in terms of trying to get those stats down. Quarter on quarter, we are seeing reductions. And as a consequence, we're not number one in South Africa anymore. We are now routinely number 3 or 4 out of the cities. And number 19 internationally. We used to sit at number 7 at one point. So we are working our way off these horrible lists and trying to create more peaceful living conditions and safety for our residents. But it is difficult when you're doing this with local government resources and you do not have control over all those key levers of the criminal justice system. And here we must unfortunately take national government to task for what they've allowed to happen on this. And it's every citizen in the country who is witnessing it. You don't need to live in one particular city or province to be aware of what's going on.
Yeah, I guess there's you aren't exactly preaching to the unconverted when it comes to the collapse of central government. But let's focus now on the area under concern, the road, the national road. When you come out of Cape Town International Airport, turn right to Cape Town, all seems to be well. Turn left towards Somerset West, all not so well, and a increasing number of violent incidents there, to the degree that Wayne Kutzer, who's a very sensible chief executive of Vergelegen Estate, got hold of me and said, "You got to do something about this. You got to get the guys at the city of Cape Town to address it." Now you've seen the response to that interview that we had on Biz News TV. What can you do to make people who live on the other side of the airport start feeling safer about driving on that national road?
So I think there are perhaps 2 things I need to say before I explain to you what we're doing, and I'll make them quick. Firstly, is that a big part of the challenge at the moment is the state of the boundary fences. The road reserve has fences at the back, and those are severely vandalized. And so turnoffs at the R300 and several other points allow for ready access to the freeway. Way too many people moving onto the freeway to effectively control through enforcement. And this is a problem that myself and the city has been fighting with national government about, because these are national roads for more than a decade. It's at the point now where Mayor Hill Lewis is working and talking to the Premier about using, again, city funding to spend an enormous amount of money to replace those walls with substantial concrete barrier walls to prevent incursion into the road and to minimize the risk. Secondly, is that this should be a lead agency issue for SAPS. We are not responsible for crime prevention, essentially. This is something SAPS should be taking the lead on, and it frustrates me a bit to the extent that that's not happening. That said, I am definitely not going to hide behind other people's responsibilities. We never do. And so on the N2, R300, N7, N1, we have a substantial additional daily deployment now. We've got 30 to 40 staff every day, depending on the requirements and whatever else is happening. That's not even including the additional deployments on Baden-Powell and around Malibongwe. And then these have been moved to a 24-hour shift deployment now. So we used to do just morning and afternoon peaks. We now have a 24-hour deployment that we've moved for. And on Wednesday, when we launch our 5 officers per ward, we will also be launching 44 extra officers that we've been working on training and developing and recruiting for the last 3 years. So this is not something we decided to do in response to an interview or to a recent crisis. We've been preparing for these additional staff deployments for some time. 44 extra officers, 40 constables and 4 sergeants will hit the road on Wednesday. So we've been trying to bolster the presence of police a lot. And if I can tell you, for instance, at the moment, that allows us to assist 1,200 vehicles in 3 months. And the last 3 months, around 400 vehicles a month. It's actually 300 in June, around 300 in July, and just under 600 in August, of vehicles that break down or become stationary, where we rush to their aid to prevent them from becoming statistics. And unfortunately, that is not an infallible process. So we've had 1 or 2 notable failures, and where we have not gotten to them in time, sometimes the criminals have. But we are really trying everything from our side to bolster that. And with that goes freeway information signs that now flash the city's call center number. 80% of those calls answered in the first and second. We've got all the variable messaging signs flashing warning messages and flashing that number. We're making sure that our cameras are fully functional. 96% of our Metro Police cameras and 85% of the freeway management system cameras, which is a tall order considering the level of vandalism that they're subjected to. Our Safety and Security Investigations Unit, after every incident, is going to investigate and work with SAPs on trying to resolve and investigate those matters. We've drawn the relevant SAP stations in. We've started working on the intelligence side. We are examining the CCTV footage in each case to see if we can identify the offenders and the patterns and the commonalities of these attacks, common clothing, common MOs. We're monitoring the freeway management cameras now. So we have our safety and security staff sitting in the mobility center at Transport Management Center monitoring those cameras. We've restarted our bait car operations where we send out a bait car to simulate somebody in distress to try and solicit an attack so we can make an arrest. We've got good arrest with drones. I will forward you some footage of the work we're doing there and the arrests that is helping us get. This is more or less what we can do, short of continuing to lobby for addressing the dysfunctional PI Act so that we can prevent structures from encroaching nearer the freeways, because that all, along with broken fences, makes it easier for bad people to engage in attacks.
JP, it's a big story for the tourism sector. There's no doubt. Are you getting any support from business?
So I just want to say that as a general rule, I don't do stuff for tourists. I do it for our residents. Tourism is important, and we have a tourism unit that is funded by the provincial government. There's some law enforcement officers in the CBD and on the mountain slopes for our domestic, local and foreign visitors. But the freeway issue and other safety issues is driven by the fact that there are crime stats and they affect our locals, and we structure our resources accordingly to try and intervene. And certainly in this case, AXA has come to the forefront. AXA is assisting us, and we will be doing those operations in that airport approach road also, and around there and on the freeways, trying to improve that safety. And any other business that wants to come forward, we have a rent-a-cop system, so they can pay for additional enforcement resources. We're happy to brand that so that they get their marketing opportunities out there. And we have already a fair number of such rent-a-cops, externally sponsored officers. And we would be very happy and very keen to see any other corporates approach us. So if I can abuse your channel for that purpose.
Oh, with pleasure. What does a rent-a-cop cost?
So depends on the extent to which we go. We can either employ them on EPWP for a fairly narrow function, or as a fully fledged law enforcement or Metro Police officer, and then you're talking around 3 officers per million. But depending on the function, we can always meet companies halfway. If it's a sponsorship like this, we'll see if we can meet them slightly more than halfway to encourage investment in public safety. We have many that already support neighborhood watches and homeowners associations and city improvement districts across the city. And that takes a burden off us. It allows more boots on the ground without adding more rates to the general ratepayer.
I know that everybody gets irritated by having to dig deeper in their pocket when central government takes a lot of taxes and should be paying for these things. But I guess it is a question now, and you are explaining that message that when you have a dysfunctional central government, you can't just sit back and say, well, throw your hands up and say it's not our fault. You've got to get involved. But the big point you made earlier about that barrier, the barrier between the highway and those who would prey upon the motorists, how much will it cost to build that wall? And what are the chances of the discussions that Jordan Hill-Lewis is having with Alan Winde being successful, that you'll have the funds to be able to make a permanent solution to this issue?
I think we are beyond talking on the matter. I can remember sitting in meetings with Robin Carlyle when he was MEC, with Sanral, trying to discuss the repair of the fences. At that stage, there were still fences to repair. Now, for the most part of it, they're completely gone and totally ineffective, especially on the N2, and especially at some of the worst hotspots. So we're beyond talking. We're already in the formal process, because it's a major capital project, of scoping and going through the approval process. And I'm fairly confident that within the next year, we will see budget approved and move towards that, whether it is city and province or city alone, and whether we can pull national government into doing their fair bit instead of paying for something with a property rates money that is already paid for with your income tax and fuel levies and everything else. So frustrating that one has to constantly divert local government resources to pay for national competencies. But this has been the case with water, with electricity, with gang enforcement, marine enforcement, and many other aspects of service delivery. And it's, again, not just Cape Town that is in this boat. Other provinces and cities are saying the same kind of thing. I think there's a general frustration building. And I suspect when we formally move towards litigation on devolution, we will find many of the local authorities around South Africa rubbing their hands in glee and egging us on, even if they're not allowed to do so publicly because of their political administrations.
So if you look back in 5 years' time, you've been doing this job now for 25 years, as you told us at the outset. If you look back in the next 5 years, what are you hoping to achieve then, given that this momentum appears to be growing to devolve the power from the center?
So I think in the first instance, the ability to properly investigate. At the moment, Metro Police's power says to prevent crime. We're asking for the addition of a few words to investigate. And in addition to that, I would add crime intelligence. You cannot effectively function as a police force without crime intelligence. You cannot effectively block organized crime. You can't stop metal theft syndicates or gangs or any other group of criminals that's organized if you as the state is not organized or do not have intelligence. And if there's one thing that is now common cause and widely agreed amongst people everywhere, between criminologists and even people within the National Police Service and every commentator, it's that crime intelligence in South Africa has all but perished. That for the last decade or decade and a half, we've not had functioning crime intelligence. And I can see this every day. And our senior staff can see it every day and tell me so from the meetings they're having with SAPS. There is not functioning crime intelligence. And that puts us at a constant disadvantage to criminals who are organized and who are well-resourced. And that's part of what's happening and what your channel covers regularly around the slow descent into a mafia state with key levers in key institutions and your criminal justice system in South Africa becoming increasingly frail and ineffective. So we're having to do what we can. The investigative powers we've already deployed in a variety of ways, not the least of which is that in regards to procurement. It is frustrating for local government when we are expected every year to protect our procurement systems against wrongdoing, but you're not permitted to have investigative power to determine when bad people or criminals or syndicates are infiltrating your procurement. So in the past, when we were dependent on forensic companies, they gave us the thumbs up. Yet some of these companies made it through those protective filters. They did not get detected. It took our Safety and Security Investigations Unit to achieve that and to deprive some big criminal names in this city of billions of rands of procurement, to lock them out of that system, to deny their vendor status by our city manager, Lungelo Mbandazayo, and to protect our city's integrity and our procurement processes and prevent us from further enabling these criminals. So we've proven that we can do it. I know we can. We're showing every day that we can. It is now for national government to get out of our way and formally acknowledge that. And if they won't, well, to meet them in court and have a court declare their resistance to that to be irrational.
When Jordan was talking about kicking down the door on electricity provision, it was a huge story. And now, of course, load shedding's behind us, and well, for the moment anyway. But Cape Town is certainly getting closer and closer to self-sufficiency. I'm sure there are many of your residents who are listening to this and saying, we're looking forward to the day when Cape Town has self-sufficiency in crime as well. But just to close off with, just give us those numbers again about the number of new boots on the ground that you're going to have this week, as you mentioned right at the outset.
So when Alan Winde promised on the 24 election he was going to create a provincial police force, I know that national government sniggered at that and said, well, you can't. Well, he had an ace up his sleeve, and he deployed 1,300 officers paid for largely by the provincial government, in part by us, in the 13 most highest priority districts. Then we added 100 extra officers to the Cape Town CBD and 30 extra officers to Mitchells Plain Town Centre, Wynberg, and Bellville CBDs as the biggest other CBDs to try and fight urban decay there and ensure that those spaces remain productive nodes for commerce and business and job creation whilst they're doing it. Now we are deploying resources to all of our wards in the city. So every ward in the city that is not a LEAP ward, which already has 100 extra staff, will get sergeant and 4 officers deployed on Wednesday. We'll also deploy just over almost 250 officers to our escort services to make sure that service delivery can proceed uninterrupted in so-called red zones, in areas where attacks on staff are high and where the extortionists, sadly, are never brought to book. So they keep on preying on our staff, which is, further to the previous conversation around investigative power and where the criminal justice system is at. And then there's 44 extra officers for our freeway, specifically the N2 and R300 and the area around the airport, to make sure that those remain safe. That is our biggest attack hotspot. But there are the problem areas along those, specifically the R300 and the N2 as well. And then there's there's a additional SWAT capacity that we're establishing to support our current tactical response unit so that we can be more impactful in our gang operations and to deal with public protests. So we're effectively creating our own public order policing capacity to complement that of SAPS's POPs, the public order policing, which is unfortunately now in short supply and will need to be bolstered. And unfortunately, as the elections come closer, so too do the protests increase, because there are many aspirant politicians trying to build their profile through such protests, and we will therefore need to have additional capacity as well.
So it's work in progress, but progress there certainly is. Alderman JP Smith is with the City of Cape Town. I'm Alec Hogg from biznews.com.